Well, that was funny. It was T-Mobile Tuesday that just interrupted me. So here we go. All right, the Fairy Council arrived promptly a few moments later. They took their positions in a big half circle around the gardens to begin sealing the gateway between the worlds. We're just waiting for the Fairy Godmother and the others, Esmeralda said. If those of you leaving this world would please take a step forward. Connor, Lady Iris, Rosemary, and Petunia all edged forward on the grass, stepping into the center of the crescent shape the council had formed. Here they come, Skylene said. Connor turned to see his grandmother, Charlotte, Bob, and his sister walking down from the palace. Bob was carrying one of the golden mirrors his grandmother had convinced the Fairy Council of approving securely under his arm. Connor avoided looking at his sister, knowing whatever devastated expression was on her face would make him more heartbroken than he already was. Remember, she's staying, isn't she? As soon as his grandmother reached the garden, she threw her arms around Connor and said a tearful goodbye. You take good care of yourself, do you understand? She said to him. I love you, Grandma, Connor said. And I love you, my darling boy, she said, and wiped the tears off of her face. I'm going to talk to you every Sunday evening through the mirror. I don't care how busy you are. There's no excuse to miss it. She playfully pointed her finger at him. I'll be there, he laughed. The sun began to set and the sky darkened. All the fairies in the half circle nodded to one another. It's time, Esmeralda said. Fairy Godmother, if you will please create a portal for our travelers for the last time. The Fairy Godmother reluctantly nodded. She stood in the front of the council and they joined hands behind her. The wind began to pick up and circled around them as the spell began, blowing the petals of the pear blossoms around like a blizzard. The Fairy Godmother waved her crystal wand and cracked it like a whip. A large tear appeared in the air. Oh, a tear. Tear. A tear appeared in the air as if the worlds were being ripped at the seam. Everyone stared at it in awe. Connor could see the living room of their rental house on the other side of it. It is done, the Fairy Godmother said, and turned back to the other fairies. As soon as the portal closes, the gateway will be closed forever. The top and bottom of the portal began retracting inward, and the seam between both worlds started closing for good. Charlotte and Bob joined Connor and the women in the center, but Alex stayed behind by the fairies. Alex, come on, let's go, Connor called to his sister. Alex didn't move, and for the first time, Connor noticed that she wasn't wearing her normal clothes. Instead, she wore a bright blue robe that sparkled like the night sky, just like their grandmother's. A headband made of the same white flowers that their grandmothers were made of was in Alex's hair, and she held a long crystal wand, also just like their grandmother's. Alex, why are you dressed like that? Connor asked. Alex's eyes welled up instantly. She looked from her mother to her grandmother for support and took a deep breath before breaking the news to him. Because I'm staying, Alex said. Connor felt like he had just been kicked in the stomach. You're what? He said. Alex had known this would be one of the most difficult moments of her life, but she could never have imagined that it was going to be this hard. I'm staying here with Grandma, Alex said. I'm going to tell you this morning, but you were gone by the time I woke up. Connor couldn't believe what he was hearing. He didn't want to believe it. He turned to his mother, hoping that she would talk some sense into his sister. Mom, tell Alex she's crazy if she's staying here, he said. But his mother didn't immediately reprimand her like he had expected. She just gazed at Alex with those large, watery eyes. She's telling the truth, Connor, Charlotte said. Connor looked back and forth between them, shaking his head. No, this can't be real, he said to himself. Why would you let her do something like this? Charlotte placed a hand on her son's shoulder. One day, when you have kids, Connor, you'll discover that your biggest fear is not always making good decisions for your children. And while I know I'll always regret this decision to let her stay, I will always know that it was the right decision, she said. You know about as much as I do that your sister belongs here. Connor felt like he had been ambushed. He looked at his grandmother, but there was no sign of an alternative answer in her eyes. Alex, what about school? Connor said. What about graduation? What about college? What about starting families of your own someday? What are you going to just throw those things all away? Alex wiped the tears from her face, even though they were quickly replaced with fresh streams. There was nothing you were going to say now or in a year that I wouldn't have thought about 100 times, Alex said. This isn't easy for me, Connor, but I know that it's what I have to do. You mean you've been planning this? Connor said. He was so angry that she hadn't even considered something so dramatic without telling him. I thought about it every day since we got back the first time, Alex said. I never thought the conditions would have been so severe, but it was even in the Snow Queen's prophecy. We just didn't recognize it. Of the 4 travelers, 1 will not return. She was talking about me. She was talking about you, me, and Mom and Bob. We were the 4 travelers, not the ones aboard the Granny. You are going to regret this, Connor said. One day you're going to look back and wish you hadn't left me and Mom. No, I won't, Alex said, because I couldn't live without this world now that I know how much it has to offer me. Connor felt like he was in a nightmare. Alex, I've never been anywhere without you in my entire life, he said. We can't live worlds apart. Don't you get it, Connor? Alex said. We were always meant to live worlds apart. Magic chose us to be the bridge between the 2 worlds. It is the reason there are 2 of us. I was always meant to stay here and succeed Grandma in magic, and you were meant to go to the other world and continue her storytelling. Don't you think it's just a coincidence that you turned out to be such a good writer? Every fiber of his being wanted to argue with her. Every inch of him wanted to reject what she was telling him. But something about seeing his sister among the fairies made him feel like everything was right in the world, even though his was crashing down around him. Alex stepped toward him and gave him the biggest hug that she had ever given him. We'll always be together, Connor, Alex said, in our hearts and in our stories. Every time you pen another story about our adventures in the land of stories, I will be right here with you. And when it isn't enough, we can always see each other through the mirrors. Esmeralda was the only one eyeing the portal. The gateway is closing, she said. You have to leave before we're all trapped in this world. For every tear that rolled down Connor's face, there was a dozen he fought back. He knew that there was no going back now. Alex had made up her mind. There was so many things to say and not enough time to say it. Connor made sure to make every final moments with his sister count and said the only thing that mattered. I love you, Alex, he said and hugged her. I love you too, Connor, she said and hugged him back. They could both feel each other's tears in the back of their necks. One by one, Lady Iris, Rosemary, Petunia, and Bob all stepped through the seam between the worlds and disappeared. Charles gave Alex one last hug before stepping through it, and Connor followed her. He watched his sister through the seam as it slowly closed, and the fairy tale world vanished before his eyes. They were now dimensions apart, yet both the twins were finally home. Alex was right. Connor could still feel her in his heart. However, underneath the pain of saying goodbye as a lingering certainty that their goodbye wouldn't last forever, despite what the fairies told him, Connor knew in his heart that his and Alex's story was far from over. The end. So we get to start book 3. This one is The Land of Stories, A Grim Warning. I'm so excited. All right, bye guys.